every week at Church at the Square. Richer and middle-class folks who are mostly white sit down with poor folks and homeless folks who are mostly black. And we worship together, we sing together, laugh together. We do communion every week. So every week we come as equals to God's table. And people's lives are changed. And it's not a one-off, I did my part, pat myself on the back, mission trip kind of thing, where I'm never going back. It's every week. And it's more than just that. It's how can we get more involved with City Square? How can we get more involved with our neighbors? So hope is an ongoing, slow journey on the streets. But seeing the world how God sees the world, that's how I define hope.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Than Sunday, a weekly podcast where we take a deeper dive into the stories, themes, and questions of our faith. My name is Julie Richter, and I'm the lead pastor to Access, our modern worship community here at First United Methodist Church, Richardson. And with me every week is Eric Jakowski, our worship director. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Julie. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, too. Did you have a good day?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. Great to get some family together. Neat to see our son Carson and his cousin together. And, you know, as often is the case with Christmas, Easter shares a lot of the same childhood joy that we get to kind of live vicariously through. And so it was neat to see those kiddos really celebrating Easter and having a great weekend together.
Okay, so I have to ask, did you have Easter baskets?
We do. We're an Easter basket family.
Nice.
Yeah.
I still have an Easter basket, too, that my family does for me, even though I'm 29 years old.
I don't think anyone's too old for an Easter
basket.
Right?
It's still just a good thing. Yeah, we always go out to East Texas after Sunday worship and go to our family farm and have a picnic out there. Fried chicken and potato salad and deviled eggs. And all of the cousins are in their late 20s and 30s. And this year, one of them turned 40. And we still do an Easter egg hunt out at the farm, but it doesn't have candy in them anymore. It now has dollar bills.
Dollar bills.
Yeah.
We graduated to dollar bills too when I was maybe a teenager. I think started. Yeah, and that's maybe a little bit better than candy at this age,
well,
right?
You know, I mean, it's good, but it's gotten a little bit competitive. But it's always just a lot of fun to be with family.
I bet at the farm that's the most epic Easter egg hunt of all.
It is. It's exhausting, but but it's a lot of fun. So this week we have such a great interview with Reverend Jonathan Grace. He's got a great story for us today because he works with those who are homeless in Dallas. And so we're going to be talking about resurrection through the lens of those who are experiencing resurrection in some different ways than we might be in our own context.
So we are in an exciting season of the church. Our senior pastor, Clayton, very often says that we are Easter people. And what he means by that is that we place our hope in Christ and our faith in resurrection, in victory over death, knowing that no matter what struggle and what suffering we go through, that because Christ overcame death on a cross, resurrection and new life is possible for us. And so now we're in a season where we celebrate resurrection and we find ways to live into that.
Yeah, so I think it'll be an interesting conversation for us to talk about what it means to live as Easter people or as resurrection people. Or one of the ways that we've talked about that before here at the church is to be citizens of hope. What does it mean for us to really live by that scripture in Romans 5 that talks about how hope does not disappoint and how we live that hope out in a world that can be stressful and divisive and seem hopeless at times?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm really excited to hear Jonathan's take through the lens of folks that he ministers with and does life with every day and how they experience resurrection. So we are really excited to introduce our guest this week. We have Jonathan Grace with us, who is pastor of a church community in Dallas. And Jonathan, we're really glad to have you with us today. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Would you tell us just a little bit about the church that you serve in downtown Dallas?
I'm a pastor of the dual appointment to Highland Park United Methodist Church and also to a nonprofit called City Square, which is a nonprofit that fights poverty through service, advocacy, and friendship. So I pastor a campus of Highland Park called Church at the Square, CATS for short.
I love it.
Nice.
Wrote that in an email one time. Thought, oh, that's neat. It's mostly homeless and formerly homeless folks that worship with us.
That's awesome. So we have just come out of Easter. Easter was last Sunday. Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter right back at you.
Thank you. So what did Easter look like for you growing up?
I always loved Easter because I was very active in First UMC Wichita Falls. And Ray Davidson, the choir director at the time, would make it this big pageant. There was a whole lot of celebration. All the choirs would sing. We'd sing the same songs every year, so I always looked forward to it. And we'd have this lily procession, and the church just did a great job, so really loved it. And then we'd leave church, go home, and have a big meal with the whole family. We got gifts. Got gifts on Easter, too. Always got Legos, which I loved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Easter was just a time of celebration and proclamation of the good news, even though I didn't understand what the good news really was at that age, other than, hey, more Legos.
Good news,
Which
more
is,
Legos.
I was going to say, for a kid that age, that is good news.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I have a feeling that for Church at the Square this last year, Easter looked a little different.
Uh-huh.
So talk to us about that experience. Describe what Easter looks like at Church at the Square.
So we don't tend to do anything too special. So this year I wanted to change that. We worship at this place called the Brady Center, which is right down the street from the Opportunity Center. I don't mean to throw out lots of locations that the listeners aren't familiar with, but I'm gonna. So we worship at this one place, but this year we did our regular worship service. In addition to that, we did a sunrise service in this empty lot next to our Opportunity Center. It's a lot we're trying to purchase. We have all this land purchased around it, but the owner knows we want it, so it's jacked up the price. So this empty lot at the moment is where a lot of homeless folks live. And whenever you have homeless folks staying somewhere, you have people who want to exploit them and harm them move in as well. So a lot of drug dealers live there or move in there. The cars that drive by and stop are probably dealing. And it's kind of the epicenter of crack in like a 5-block radius. Just tons and tons of crack is dealt there. So we had a sunrise service there because folks in that neighborhood and in that lot specifically, most of them believe in Christ and believe in the resurrection, but that's kind of a distant concept for them. So we went in and we had this worship service where we claimed that this is not Satan's neighborhood. It's not the crack dealer's neighborhood. It's Christ's neighborhood. And we want to reclaim this lot and reclaim all of your lives for a greater purpose because it's the day for new life. New life is possible, and new life is what we all need.
In your particular ministry context, how do you see resurrection?
In a number of ways. I think a lot of us, and me, I include myself in this, think of resurrection as after death. We transition from life and into life through death. But resurrection, since I started working with homeless folks, it's taken on a whole new concept. I believe in resurrection in this life. Every time Jesus talks about new life, I'm thinking of his conversations like Nicodemus. He's not only talking about where we end up after we die, but life right now, that there's something about our relationship with Christ that transforms the here and now, us, our communities, our churches, our cities, and the world. So we really strive for resurrection at City Square and at Church at the Square. We want to see people take hold and understand what sin is and the powerful influence that it has. Not just individual sins, although there's plenty of those, but some of the societal sins that they deal with every single day, the lack of affordable housing, the burden we put on our police officers and what they go through, and how that's often instead of a positive relationship of our police protecting our homeless citizens, we often send our police in to bust up their camps, and everyone hates it and everyone suffers. So there's all these ways in which we as a city of Dallas sin against our homeless neighbors. And so resurrection not only means new life in the future, but new life now, and not just new life for the individual, but new life for our city.
Do you have a story of resurrection that you've seen or experienced in this community?
There's a lot. So we have this tiny home complex called the Cottages at Hickory Crossing. It's 432 square foot homes with a bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom that are meant to house the 50 hardest to house homeless folks in Dallas, people who have been to jail the most, who have a mental health condition, who are chronically homeless and have a physical health condition. So we have these homes for them, on-site case management, on-site physical health care, mental health care, and pastoral care through me. So we built these homes, and it took forever, but we got some people moved in, and I went in there pretty naive. Like, I wanted everyone to take hold of this new life and everyone to celebrate that they have this new chance, this new opportunity. And a lot of them did. Some of them didn't. And it was really painful to watch that happen, to watch some people throw it away. But there's one guy in particular. I won't use his real name because I don't have permission to tell the story. But he moved in and he was struggling with his alcoholism. He has a whole history. His family is messed up. And alcohol just destroyed his life. And like the day after he moved in, I was driving to work, had my wife and daughter in the car. We just had one car at that point. And I see him at a bus stop near my house. I'm like, I think that's... So I circled the car around and pick him up, and he'd been drinking the night before, blacked out, went to his old transitional house. Like he didn't even know where he lived anymore. And he was waiting at a bus stop in January, freezing cold, wrapped in an old blanket. So I picked him up. He reeked of alcohol, introduced him to my family. He was so embarrassed to be in my car. But I was like, I'm just glad I saw you because I don't want you freezing out there. And, took him back, talked to him about it, how he was doing, how he was feeling. And he was just really struggling. Took him back to his home, and it was wrecked. There was food all over the floor. There's old vomit encrusted on the floor. I mean, this is a few days into him moving in. It was really bad. And so he took a few weeks. He went to rehab, went to an inpatient rehab for about a month. And then he came back, and after a few days, I checked on him. And he must have crawled all over the floor scrubbing it because his home was completely clean. It looked entirely different. And he took it upon himself to really invest in himself and to take care of his new home. And he started getting up and jogging. He was going out to job interviews wearing suits, looking a lot nicer than me, just killing it. And then he relapsed, and he went back to another period of struggle. And he got better, and he got a little worse, and he's at a point now where he's a little bit better. So for a lot of our folks, resurrection is an ongoing journey. And the demons that kind of drag us down, just preached on Romans 7 a few weeks ago and talked about, there's this thing inside of me that makes me do the things I don't want to do. I do the things I hate. So we were trying to come to terms with our own sin and how it can just wreck our lives so quickly. And so that's what we struggle with. But the good news is we struggle together. And so this guy has a whole community of friends to rely on. And his family community failed him. So God's given him this new family. And I'm overjoyed to be a part of that. So right now we're watching him. He's coming to church. He has a great message. And all these folks in the cottages, they get to tell people who they lived with in homeless encampments, like, hey, I got housed. If I can do it, you can do it. So not only is there resurrection in their lives, but they're carrying that message to other people. Now, the other story I want to tell is about a friend of mine, also named Julie.
Yeah.
And she was a giant pain in the butt.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You're not.
No, Eric. Cut it out.
She's this homeless woman who's addicted to crack, living on the street. And I mentioned earlier that the cottages were just a nightmare to build. 2015 was the wettest year on record in Texas in forever. So the construction constantly stopped. All these issues came up. So they were way, 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 way behind schedule. But we wanted Julie to move into the cottages. That was our goal. And she watched these things slowly get built. The frames go up and the walls go in, and hoped one of those would be her home. She would come in. I'd have coffee and sugar and cream and cups for folks. So I like to get to know folks over a cup of coffee. And she would steal all the sugar. I would watch her because I knew she would do it. And she was like this ninja cat, just really stealthy and quick. Because I would just turn my head for a second and look back, and she'd already emptied it, just poured the sugar into her purse and bolted for the door. And people were like yelling at her and trying to fight her and like, let's calm down. But one day, she comes in, picks her head in the door. Hey, Pastor, got a cup of coffee? Sure, Julie, come on in. And we started talking, and I turned my back, and she stole a whole bag of sugar. And so I said, you are stealing from your fellow homeless neighbors. You need to stop that. And that has lost it. She yelled at me. I yelled at her. I followed her into the street yelling at her, and words were exchanged I won't use right here. We're in the middle of the street making this huge scene. And I walk away like, I'm done working with Julie. I'm done with her. I've done enough for her. Screw it. And the next morning, she comes in, and she says, Pastor, I'm really sorry about what I did. I'm sorry too. I overreacted. I shouldn't have yelled at you. That was inappropriate, and I'm so sorry. But you understand you're stealing from your neighbors. Yeah, I understand that, and I'm going to stop doing it. Thank you. Got a cup of coffee? Absolutely. Let's talk. So we had this ongoing, really strange relationship. But she was really difficult to work with, quick to anger, quick to make others mad, but loved her anyway in some weird way, some weird Jesus-y way. Just love people that you don't know how you love them. And so as the cottages were almost complete, her daughter, knowing that new life was coming for her, gave her a car. Like, Mom, you're about to get off the street. I'm going to give you this car. I want to get you, the transportation, all that. That's a huge problem a lot of homeless folks have, is just physically getting places. At this time, she also made a decision that I'm sure the listeners and all of us in this room will agree was a good one. She decided to get off of crack. She gave up drugs. And her drug dealer did not appreciate this, as you can imagine. Drug dealers aren't really thrilled when people make really good life decisions that involve leaving drugs behind. So he told her, give me the car and I'll stop bothering you. Otherwise, you need to keep buying crack from me. And she said, no. That's some choice words, apparently. And so he paid 4 other women $5 to beat her. They beat her with some metal pipes, and they killed her. So that was one of the more difficult moments in ministry for me, was coming to work, and I've had a lot of folks pass away on the streets, and several murders. But to hear that Julie, someone so close to me that I cared about so much, had been beaten to death because she did the right thing, and because her family cared about her, that these factors led to her death. So Julie's resurrection isn't the one that we'd hoped for. It wasn't moving into the cottages and taking advantage of the new life or anything that City Square or Highland Park or I could have done for her. Julie's resurrection was something that only Christ can do for us. And so at the end of the day, when I come to terms with how inadequate I can be and how limited all of our resources can be, I'm so thankful that beyond everything, beyond life itself, there's a new life with Christ. And one day, Julie and I are going to sit down with another cup of coffee. She's going to steal all the sugar she can in heaven. And I'm just really excited about seeing her again.
Wow.
So on the heels of a story like that, and for your brothers and sisters that you work with in Dallas, how do you define hope for them?
We have 4 H's we work with at City Square: health, housing, hunger, and hope. So it's really easy to measure hunger, how much food our food pantry gives out, or how many meals we provide to kids in our summer feeding program, how many people we get into housing and stay in housing over 3 months, 6 months, a year. Health, how many people our medical clinics see. So it's easy to measure those criteria, but hope is something else. Without hope, you're not going to go try to get a job or go through our job training program. You're not going to try to make your life better. So a lot of the folks that I'd see every day that I'm in relationship with, keeping hope alive is incredibly difficult because they need to see a new world. Why wouldn't you sell your body or smoke crack or become an alcoholic if that's the best it can be? I mean, crack is a horrible drug. Destroys your mind, your body, your soul. People beat you, rape you, steal from you when you're on it. It only is a 15-minute high, but that's 15 minutes away from the world. And so people every day gladly take that deal. So hope on the street means looking at the world how God sees the world. That what is not what will be. And so what I like to remind folks is, hey, we have this opportunity center here. This was not here several years ago. The cottages are built and people live there. We're buying property for other purposes. We're trying to bring hope and new life to this neighborhood, be a part of God's justice work in this neighborhood. And by the way, Highland Park, United Methodist Church, which I bet has the same reputation as this one in some circles, cynically, as your rich folks that just care about themselves and their money, want to hear a nice message. And Highland Park is not that. What we've discovered is it's a church full of folks who care deeply about their community and decided we're going to get together with this City Square thing and see what we can do in Dallas. And every week at Church at the Square, richer and middle-class folks who are mostly white sit down with poor folks and homeless folks who are mostly black. And we worship together, we sing together, laugh together. We do communion every week. So every week we come as equals to God's table. And people's lives are changed. And it's not a one-off, I did my part, pat myself on the back, mission trip kind of thing, where I'm never going back. It's every week. And it's more than just that. It's how can we get more involved with City Square? How can we get more involved with our neighbors? So hope is an ongoing, slow journey on the streets. But seeing the world how God sees the world, that's how I define hope. And that's kind of how I see my job, is just encouraging folks to see that and to prove that that's going to be reality.
I mean, that is an image of hope right there. that we worship alongside each other, that we come from the same God and are all created as children of God and all searching for the same resurrection and life and meaning. So for us here in Richardson and for those listening to the podcast, how can we be more connected to City Square? Website, volunteering, how can we be connected to the work that you're doing?
So the immediate answer, there's some volunteer opportunities. If you go to Highland Park's website, search under worship services, Church at the Square is on there. Every week a group comes in and provides lunch. So that's one opportunity for a group to come to Church at the Square, provide lunch, and sit and worship with our neighbors. We do hope for kind of ongoing relationships. So there's some specific things we can talk about. We're kind of trying to move from a charity-based relationship to a justice-based relationship. So with charity, it's the coat drive, it's the food drive. We're going to, collect socks and hygiene kits, which is great and necessary. But if that's where the church, and not just this church, but any church, stops at, we're not really doing all the work we're called to do. So justice is more about transforming lives. Don't just provide a coat. Question, why can't someone buy their own coat? What systems are in place right there? And you get into discussions about job training, mental health care, living wages, and things like that. So one thing you can do that's a little more day-to-day is get to know people that aren't like you. It's awkward and it's weird and it's uncomfortable, and it's fine. Life is messy, and it's a good thing. But spend some time in prayer. What's God calling you to do? And if that's to get to know City Square or Church at the Square, I would love that. But there's stuff in this neighborhood that you're called to do, and that's another thing to engage with, not necessarily anything in Dallas, but what's the justice issue in Richardson? But yeah, anytime y'all want to come and worship at Church at the Square, more than welcome to. Would love it and love to build a partnership and see what we can do to help each other. The last thing I'll say about that, I get a lot of folks who want to bring Christ to our homeless neighbors, which is great. But what they don't acknowledge is that Jesus is sending them forth to meet Jesus. So they think, I'm going to bring Christ to folks. Lucky for them, they get to meet me today. And the reality is, Jesus lives in homeless camps. And a lot of these folks know Christ, have an incredible relationship with Jesus. It's incredibly impressive to me. All the books I should have read in seminary that I kind of pretended to pass the tests, a lot of my congregation has read, and they'll ask me these great questions. So that's one thing to be aware of. If you do come to Church at the Square or City Square, you're going to meet your sisters and brothers in Christ, and it's going to be a wonderful thing. It'll be a heartbreaking thing, but ultimately it's a holy thing.
I love that. All right, so we've got one other question for you. It's the big one, Jonathan. So
Is it about heavy metal?
depending on how you answer it might be. All right. Up to this point in your life, what is the one thing you wish someone would have told you?
Oh, my goodness. The one thing I wish someone would have told me is something that my parents have told me all the time. They continually tell me is that you are loved deeply, that you are known. You are known and you are loved. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram. And so to be known is something that I constantly search for. So a lot of the, flamboyancy of me is just trying to get myself out there. This is who I am. I'm a heavy metal fan, long hair, and I'm weird, and Dungeons and Dragons, and love Game of Thrones. Like, I'm trying to present to the world in these messed up ways, like, who am I? So someone is saying, stop it. That's all fine. Nothing wrong with all that. But you are made in the image of God, and you are loved so much, and God knows you and loves you, and there's a community of faith here on earth that knows you and loves you. And so not necessarily someone telling me that, but me hearing that and understanding it has been a lifelong struggle.
I think no matter what number we are on the Enneagram, that's a good thing for all of us to remember.
Yeah.
So
for
thanks
sure.
for sharing that. Jonathan, thanks so much for taking some time with us today and sharing, gosh, what a unique perspective you have on resurrection. Just so insightful for all of us to hear. We really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me again. This is wonderful.
And so we come to a close with our I Believe series. And in doing so, we realize that the nature of this creed, and very often the nature of our faith, is cyclical. We look back at the beginning of our creed where we talk about God as creator, and at the very end, observe that new life is created, that we are recreated through Christ. And I think a perfect illustration of that is in Philippians 1, where Paul says in verse 6, I'm confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of More Than Sunday. We've got a new episode coming out every Wednesday, so make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and on YouTube so you don't miss our next show. If you want to find out more about the Access community here at First United Methodist Church Richardson, you can find us online at accessfumcr.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Special thanks to Jonathan for joining us this week, and make sure and tune in next Wednesday as we start a new sermon series looking at how we build the kingdom of God through our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our service. Have a great week.